Hello and welcome to a buildingSMART webinar. This webinar is hosted by the buildingSMART regulatory domain and is part of a series of open house sessions planned to occur in between the biannual buildingSMART summits. Thank you for joining. My name is Sheila Karailam and I will be your moderator today. Today's webinar is titled Announcing the buildingSMART Regulatory Information Requirements. Our speakers are Tomi Henttinen, CIO at Gravicon, and Nicholas Nisbet, who is Director at AEC3 Limited and Vice Chair of the buildingSMART UK&I chapter. This webinar is scheduled to last 1 to 1.5 hours with a short Q&A at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available in due course. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to remind you that your lines will remain muted for the duration of the presentations. However, if you have any questions or wish to make comments, please use the chat function located within the control panel. I would also like to bring your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent. And standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider and are open, non-binding and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct, which is on the screen. And on that note, I would like to hand over to Nicholas to start the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for attending this session. We're going to be talking about the regulatory information requirements, which is a project that is coming to a conclusion launched by the regulatory domain of buildingSMART International. And just to explain a few things about how buildingSMART operates and how the domain work. First of all, I'll introduce you to the steering committee. As you can see, we have representation from across the world, and we meet to discuss how open standards can contribute to improving the regulatory process. And I think the outcomes are often reports and other initiatives which go through the formal buildingSMART process. And on the left, you can see that we use each of the domains to act as a funnel to collect industry needs. And then we create working groups to execute projects in the middle, which hope to build consensus around a solution. In this case, it's a set of rules on how to use BIM. And then we are approaching the stage where that will be a candidate standard and part of the buildingSMART offering. The other thing that we do is that we've been thinking quite hard about the maturity of this topic of using BIM in regulatory processes. And over a decade ago, we outlined that there were probably 4 steps between the current manual processes that affect most building permitting processes and full automation. We have the idea that there are low-hanging fruits where BIM information could be used to support regulatory applications alongside the current submittals of drawings and schedules. There may be another step which we called hybrid, where there might be opportunities to help present the information to the regulators to make their decisions, present information from building models. But ultimately, we do see the aim as being that there should be a large degree of automation of the process, and all the benefits that would bring in terms of consistency and accuracy and speed. And in fact, the reality is that several jurisdictions around the world including Finland and Estonia and Dubai and Singapore, are moving directly to automation of substantial parts of the regulatory process. In order to encourage that, we have prepared or are preparing a document called Guidance for Regulators on the benefits of OpenBIM, which is the flagship expression of the buildingSMART suite of standards. And that publication is nearing completion and should be available within the next few, well, if I say the next month or so, I think that will be accurate. And this is deliberately a document in order to get the message that OpenBIM answers a lot of the questions that regulators have or think they have about automation and shifting away from PDF documents and so on. Another of our projects is the regulatory information requirements. But before looking at that, I'd like to say a few words about buildingSMART as a whole. buildingSMART is a not-for-profit organization. It's a network of chapters which are country-based. I think there are now 35 chapters around the world, many in Europe, but increasingly in South America. And Morocco has recently become a chapter. And of course, in the Middle East and Far East, there's quite a few as well. buildingSMART has a long history going back 25 years, and it aims to take leadership around the subject of digitalization, of asset information and the processes around built assets. We develop and promote standards as being open and free to use. And we have a special relationship with ISO to, for some cases, we can accelerate the adoption of buildingSMART standards as ISO standards, which is important in many parts of the world to get that endorsement. And we also, buildingSMART also has compliance processes like certifying individuals, validating particular implementations or sample files, and assessing information delivery. So we do that by offering a number of tools and a number of standards. And this is a quick summary of how the different buildingSMART standards come together. Most BIM projects start with an idea about information requirements, and rather than capturing those in spreadsheets or leaving them in spreadsheets or PDFs or annexes to contracts, we can use a buildingSMART standard called IDS to convey information requirements electronically. And that means that they can be used to configure tools and to check the deliverables in due course. And to create IDS files, we have the resource called the buildingSMART Data Dictionary, which is an online source of terms for describing objects and for describing properties and attributes, which is free to access and contained a lot of the additional content for use with the next standard, which is, of course, is the IFC, which is the, I suppose, the flagship standard of buildingSMART. Once you've used your authoring tools for creating IFC files, then we can validate that IFC file against the published definition of IFC, but we can also check the IFC against any IDS that may have been created. And if there are issues, we have a format called BCF, which allows topics, including issues or discrepancies, to be reported back in an electronic form back into the information, or back to the information authors in due course. And last of all, I would mention that we are we have a standard called OpenCDE for improving the communications around the sharing of models, IFC files, and BCF messages into shared repositories. So the buildingSMART suite of standards covers quite a large, well, it covers the entire process, but IFC is at the heart of it. Many of you will be aware that
model.
Oh, sorry.
A 3D model of the architecture, in this case, of a Cero building, terraced of houses called 246 The Mill.
Excuse me a moment. I wasn't expecting that. Let me just delete that. Then we can hopefully return. And I can say what I wanted to say was most of you will be aware of IFC as being a file format for sharing BIM information. And that's entirely correct. You can use it that way. And in this case, you can see that it contains both geometry in the picture, and you can also see that it is on the right, that it contains the geometry broken down into named objects of various kinds: walls, windows, doors, slabs, others, of course, and also spaces, so that it doesn't have to only be physical things. And that organizes the information and makes it accessible to recipients of the information, and it makes it accessible to machines. This is an overview of all the things that you might talk about or find in an IFC file. The top two rows cover the physical, solid stuff, and the spatial stuff, like sites and the facility or building, the zones and systems, the spaces and elements, and under libraries, you can see how they are specified in detail. I would also mention that there are also aspects of the IFC that cover processes like work plans and tasks, and we can represent the resources needed to turn to support those processes in making a change to the built environment. So the IFC is comprehensive enough to support all of the processes around the built environment. Many people ask, as a result, is IFC too rigid? And I'd like to use this diagram just to say that the IFC is onion-shaped or ring-shaped. At the center of it, we have the buildingSMART schema or data model, and that is what is the ISO standard. Around it, we also have a set of properties and quantities that are part of the IFC standard, but we can extend it further if we need to with the building content and the buildingSMART data dictionary. And of course, any country or any project or any software application can choose to define additional properties for their own needs. And so that gives the opportunity to say that we can extend what the IFC is good for by looking at the buildingSMART data dictionary and saying what extra properties are needed. And in the regulatory information requirements project, that's what we did. we said that although the building regulations are different around the world, on the whole, they cover similar topics, and actually, you know, and within those topics, like safety in the case of fire, and safety and accessibility in use, and energy efficiency, there are indeed common things that we try and regulate, such as escape distances, such as door widths and corridor widths, and so on and so forth. And that suggested to us that the industry would benefit from some recommendations about the common factors or topics that people are addressing in the regulations. So we're not standardizing the regulations. That's not going to happen anytime soon. What we are doing is saying in a large number of cases, there is common information needed, which, if present in a building model, would go a long way to preparing building models for regulatory checking, both by designers and by regulators. Of course, there are some exclusions to the scope that we set out to address. We haven't addressed mechanical resistance and stability because they're addressed by applications mainly, rather than rule checking. And of course, we certainly haven't tried to address architectural quality, and so on. So we highlighted the most common areas that regulations affect, and we started to collect inputs from around the world about what the key properties and object types are that are regulated. And here you can see a small extract looking at windows and the subject of safety in the case of fire, and some points that we gathered from England and Wales, from Estonia, from Singapore, and we brought them together to say, actually, there's a lot of commonality. So that was the project, and I should say that I'm very grateful to the Scottish government and the Finnish government through the Rather 3 Pro project for sponsoring this work, and of course all the other individuals and jurisdictions that have helped us in doing it. And now I'm going to hand over to Tomi, so we'll have to change the screen sharing, and he'll go into a little bit more detail about where we've got to. So I'll stop sharing. No, I won't. Just a second. Stop sharing. And Tomi, do you want to pick up?
Yep.
Thanks.
And to presentation mode. Yep. Yeah, my name is Tomi Henttinen, coming from Finland. I was while preparing for this presentation, I was going through the documents that we have prepared for this or developed during this project, and I found that the first ideas were put together to 2020, and yeah, so it's been a long journey, and during that journey we have there has been new legislation, for example, in Finland, that was accepted last year, that the BIM is coming mandatory. The new legislation is activated January 1st, 25, and there's a 1-year transition time, and beginning from January to 2026, the IFC will, well, the legislation does not mention IFC specifically, but the bottom line is that there is no other way to provide the models to building authority. It means that from January 1st, 2026, IFC will become mandatory for building permit processes. There are some exclusions, especially, for example, smaller buildings and maybe some small new buildings and small scale renovation projects. But let's say that all or most of the professional construction will be included with this requirement. And yeah, many times people think that it's only for public buildings. No, this is for here in Finland, it's for all buildings. So it's the client does not kind of it doesn't matter who is the client. Is it the public or private organization? But anyway, so that as a background, this project has been kind of really kind of on the topic that we have discussed here in Finland. And like Nick said, we have had for this project also some support from Finland, and we have been doing parallel work at the same time. There are similar developments elsewhere, and I will briefly go through what we have done here. So the project management, I have been leading this project together with Nick Nisbet, who is our domain leader. Nowadays we are calling rooms. Room was the old name, and now we are called domain, regulatory domain. And then we have from buildingSMART, Richard Kelly and Sheila Kirelan, who have been helping us with this, mainly Sheila. If you have any questions or comments, please send email to regulatory@buildingsmart.org, or go to the website and you can find under the standards you find, probably it's not called rooms anymore, it's called domains. So standards, domains, and regulatory. Besides me and Nick, there has been quite a good number of members. There's the order in here is probably order of how when people have joined the project. So Estonia, Christopher Robin Reitvier has been really active in the project. He has provided a lot of information to us, and that's because in Estonia the building permitting BIM-based building permit system is actually already alive, so it's already up and running. Also Weiwan from Singapore has been really active in the group. In Singapore there is also, Singapore has been using BIM for quite a long time, I guess more than a decade already. But now the late development has been that they are moving from the proprietary formats to open formats, which is IFC in this case. Tom Beach from UK provided us a lot of information, and Nick, helped me out. What was the project that you were working?
DCOM.
DCOM, yes, thanks. Yeah, and big thanks to Frank from Scottish government. He provided us information and funding. Tamir, Masaki, Rick, they are all, and Adrian also, Paulina, I guess, also are all members of the steering group. They've been sharing information, and the latest member or addition to the team is Ali Ismail from Dubai. where actually Dubai launched BIM-based building permits early this year. So they are already up and running, at least in some extent, and it's limited to certain size buildings. But anyway, they already are doing this. So this has been the team, and I'm really happy that we have had quite sort of all over the world. Let's say that we have it's not limited to Europe or Asia. It's kind of a global thing. The background for the project, there was already, so this is going few years back, so there was already a worldwide interest using the open standards in regulatory processes, and that was revealed by the survey that we did in the regulatory room, or the regulatory domain should be called today. And there was already at that time a significant progress made by several countries and regions mentioned in here. And at that time, there was a kind of growing interest to use the buildingSMART data dictionary, BSDD, as a universal resource. And of course, the life safety and especially environmental regulations were becoming already kind of a trending topic globally. So those were kind of the starting points where we started to develop this project. Well, why it's then important? It's the regulatory approval processes are kind of worldwide. It's a major source of delay and therefore also a risk for the building projects. If there are long delays, that could even, in worst case, cancel the whole project. There are very limited number of standards for the information needed in the process. And then the kind of there's a need for vendor independent international conventions, and there through those we could encourage development and adoption of BIM in the regulatory use, and of course already 2020. But if we look at the situation or status today, the BIM-based building permit processes are becoming more kind of common worldwide. So it's kind of automating. There is a big need to automate and use the digital data within the models, and therefore we need standardization also for that. We scoped the project. Of course, this is a really kind of large topic. So we scoped the project so that it kind of low-hanging fruits or the most needed things. So the identification data of the buildings, then life safety and structure safety and fire safety related information, energy and the environmental like carbon footprint and reusing data, and then accessibility of buildings. So those kind of we focused on a couple of use cases, and the kind of the main goal was to ensure that buildingSMART, the IFC standard developed by buildingSMART, meets these needs or the needs coming from these use cases. In the process map, you could say that we have the concept and zonal approvals. So this is kind of from another report that we did some years ago in the regulatory domain, it was identified that there's a globally the building permit process follows pretty much similar process, and there come some variations country to country, but there's a kind of a common thing that all regulators or the authorities are following, and so the concept and zonal approvals where we need the identification and location data. Then we have the technical design and construction approvals where we have, for example, structural safety and in-use safety. And then approvals for occupation and use where we have the accessibility and in-use safety information. Couple of outcomes from these, so maybe a deeper look. So project information and identification, we are looking at location, or we were looking at location. There's a large number of different coordinate systems worldwide or even locally. We have here in Finland at the moment, I think about 10 coordination systems that are used even parallel sometimes. That's chaos. Then we have the site and building separation. And then, of course, the standardized IFC solution for these. Identification and classifications and historic classes. What's the impact of different building types, and then international references such as INSPIRE, which is used here in Europe, and then zones and uses of areas. So we have different zone types and different area and space measurement rules. Life safety. So then for the life safety, we have the structural, so identification of bearing and non-bearing elements, type of structures, materials, fire protection properties, fire departments, escape routes, suppression terminals, and so on. And then accessibility, access route measurements, wheelchair circles, and so on. And then we have the building performance, which are related to energy use, embedded carbon, environmental impacts in general, energy sources, heating and cooling systems, and then finally demolition and waste. And then specifically for accessibility, kind of access routes on site, access routes in the building, doors and door-related requirements, railings and handrails. Accessibility is not only for people using wheelchairs, it's also accommodation for the visually impaired, accommodation for the hearing impaired, and then other kind of people from different handicap groups using lifts, chair lifts, and other assistive devices such as hearing devices and so on. So the work packages that we've been working, they have a little bit developed, let's say, during the process, but in general, we have these work packages, of course, project management, including reporting and accountants. But then we have we started with the requirements, so we tried to capture the business need. We reviewed the existing IFC for PSETs and buildingSMART data dictionaries. Then we moved to development phase. We took actually a number of existing property sets tables from different members in the project. So, for example, Estonia and Finland had already developed and UK had developed already some property lists, and we put together those, and I think that at some stage we had more than 2,000 new properties in the list. And then now we are in the phase of populating all this. So BSDD is the place where we are going to populate this. And then we are also studying the IDS validation. So there is kind of the tools and methods how to do this, how to publicate the results, and finally how to test this. And then at the end of the day, all these technical things are not really useful if there is no guidance. So we would definitely need some technical and end user guidance. The technical guidance will be needed for the technical committee, so that because we're one of the goals that we have is to have this included in the future versions of these specifications that we have done, to include those in the future versions of IFC. Like I said, we compared several guidelines also and specifications from the project partners. The common findings were that the standard fields of the current IFC specification are not enough for the information required for the building permit process, and the data fields that are defined in the standard are not fully supported in the authoring tools. And therefore, many countries have developed national property sets and properties, while they at the same time feel that there's a kind of common need to more kind of a static international standardized solution. So that was highly needed. Like I said, we compiled a set of property fields based on the tables developed by each country. Several thousand properties were found, and now we have compromised that to a couple of hundreds. We also did a study on those and studied if the current IFC specification, the existing standard meets, and to be honest, there is actually a lot of overlapping things in the national specifications and in the existing IFC standard. So IFC standard already has many of the properties which were kind of then recorded also as a national versions or in these national tables. One of the findings was that maybe sometimes IFC is not very logical, so you might find a property which you need in a property set which is not really kind of clear that it should be there, and maybe some arrangement, but also the BSDD approach could help in that. And then we identified kind of the additional needs to also to complement the IFC specifications, not only for properties, but also for predefined types, which is kind of the subclass of IFC class. So finally, the deliverables from the project which we have in the final proposal is that we have no new classes, meaning that we are not going to propose any new IFC wall, IFC beam or window type of things. But we have in the list about 180 new predefined types, which are kind of the subclasses of those IFC classes, and about 200 new properties, which is a kind of compromise of the 2000 plus properties that we had at one stage. We are going to publish this into buildingSMART Data Dictionary. We are, like I said, we are now also studying how to validate this, developing the IDS rule sets, and then finally also a summary report and some guidance documents. So what is to finalize, what is the added value of this? We are aiming to improve the communication between applicants and regulators. There are in many jurisdictions, there is actually the goal is to automate the checking of the models. In order to automate the checking and reading information from the models, the information needs to be standardized. As an example, here in Finland, we have typically annually all jurisdictions put together around 10 to 11,000 building permit applications every year. And if we estimate that maybe half of them in the future would be IFC based, then nobody has time to study each model individually. That's just nonsense. So we need a really harmonized way to present the information in the model, and it should follow standards, and also it's not only that we have to have the ability in the standard to do this, we also need to teach people to do this. This would also lead to improved pre-checking of the application, so that the applicant could go to, so we are already kind of testing this here in Finland, that the applicant could, before applying the building permit, could go to the building permit system and pre-check the model, or use IDS and some of the tools found in the market that support IDS, and do this at their own workstation. This could also, or this will improve the compliance checking. I think that compliance checking in general is a long journey, so this is just one of the first steps, or maybe not the first steps, but this is one of the steps towards that. But this project will not be the end station in this. And then, of course, all this is aiming to improve turnaround of applications, a shorter time used in evaluating the application at the authority, and also improve accuracy and predictability of the outcomes. So we feel that there is the building permit process is the one, or maybe the only common projects process globally, which is kind of mandatory in all countries. And so basically you can say that without the building permit, there is no construction work. So it's something that every project has to pass, and therefore there's it makes sense to harmonize at least the information and kind of the framework, the schema for that process. So that's my part. Back to Nick.
Okay. Thanks, Tomi. What I'd like to do now is share again. And just take a look at a simple example which we developed into at the Valencia conference, which occurred just over a month ago. And this was the regulatory domain supporting the building domain in a demonstration of various aspects of the role of IFC and OpenBIM. And as a very simple demonstration that we could pack into 40 minutes, we invited one of the supporters of buildingSMART to write a brief for a beach house. And you can see here that an architect has prepared a proposal. The pirate flag was part of the client specification, so we've made sure that's there. And you can see that it is fairly close to the beach. Much to our amusement, someone from the Valencia City Council was in the room, and he immediately pointed out that building within 50 meters of the shoreline is now banned. But we pressed on regardless of this major omission. And we thought that it would be useful to examine the proposal. It's a simple one bed, but suitable for entertaining, one bedroom beach house, but suitable for entertaining, with a nice big awning and an upper terrace as well. The contribution we made was to talk about the regulatory information requirements aspect of this. And what we did was to pull some very simple items from the regulatory information requirements to illustrate how the workflow might work. So we pulled out things like a unique name for any objects that are going to have compliance checking applied to them, latitude, longitude, and elevation to locate it, and also to confirm the jurisdiction, occupancy numbers. And another team was looking at building energy modeling information requirements, which have been prepared separately. So these were the kinds of information clients we were interested in. And the reason we were interested in it, that we'd prepared a Valencia building code for residential buildings. And you can see here that it had 3 clauses: identification and location of the building and the site, health, well-being, accessibility. So there was a requirement that habitable rooms should have windows of a certain minimum area, and that doors should have at least 800 millimeter clear width. And then sustainability, there was a requirement picked up from the building energy modeling information requirements that items in the external envelope should have a thermal transmittance not exceeding a certain value, and that doors and windows should have an adequate solar reflectance to resist summertime overheating. So these regulations seemed relevant and interesting and varied enough. And what we were able to show was that not only could we check that the information required was present using IDS, but we were also able to go on and actually generate a automatic compliance checking system. And in this case, Rob's retreat was assessed systematically, and we were able to generate a notification of failure on the first version of the design, that there were 2 doors whose clear width was inadequate, and there were a number of other objects that didn't have a unique name. So those were rectified, and then we were able to proceed with the project. So I think the role of the regulatory information requirements is to make sure that projects can be prepared with the right basic information, and that any individual or organization, or indeed a building inspectors, will be able to have methods of inspection. It could be automated, but going back to the stepwise approach, we'll also be able to automatically generate reports which tabulate the information that's being assessed, and maybe accelerate the manual process by just making the information more accessible to the people who are charged with doing the assessments. So a nice little exercise, all in 45 minutes, and I've compressed it into 5, which is probably not fair. But what we can do now is just say, we presented what we're doing and what we've done. Our plan is to have the IDS files and the BSDD entries ready by the, well, I'll say the end of next month, the end of June. And at that point, people will be invited to test or trial either the BSDD or the IDS documents we produce. So it's now time to say, are there any questions and comments?
There is already one question. What about the need of new data type of properties nationally? Is that something you observed in this study?
Yes. Depending on how you count them, we were reviewing several thousand suggestions, and we made a classification of them, of the suggestions. Some we did deem to be too local to one jurisdiction, and I will offend Tomi by saying that that in Finland there is a requirement that you should specify the number of saunas provided in a building. Now, I think it's quite easy to say that that is culturally specific to the Nordic countries and Finland in particular, and that it wasn't really appropriate to add it to an international standard. We also looked at, we sort of classified some of the information requirements as being already present in buildingSMART BIM models, either because the property sets or whatever are there, or it's implicit in the geometry. So, for example, if there is a requirement that residential buildings should have 2 staircases, that's not a property. That's something that you query of the building model to establish how many staircase spaces there are, or how many stairs there are. There are a few other exceptions that we put to one side, but it's perfectly possible for any country to develop their own recommendations and requirements. We would hope that they wouldn't overlap, with what we will have published. Obviously, the two of the countries that we've already been discussing have made their requirements, and we'll just have to live with that. But they can, yeah, any country can have additional requirements. I think we'd be very happy to comment on the right process, because, as I say, it's important not to mix up the results of calculations, like how many staircases, with real additional information requirements. The other thing, well, yes, so we can expect that. And of course, there are regulations we haven't addressed. The basics of the structural information will be there, but exactly how structural adequacy is assessed is a much more complicated and specialized area. Lo and behold, in the UK, we have a new part to our approved documents only this month on the provision of separate assigned sexual toilet facilities. Now, I think that would actually be in scope of what we've already recommended, but we also have a requirement for Wi-Fi access to new buildings, high-speed internet access to new buildings. So there will be country specifics.
Mm. Actually, the high-speed internet access is included in the properties, because that was not only UK.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But about the data types themselves, one of the kind of let's say challenges is that we have let's say like fire rating, which is typically it implicates the number of minutes that the structure or a component holds fire or is resistant for fire. Then in Europe we have one type of kind of a marking system, but then that's only Europe. Elsewhere it could be different, and so it's kind of a compromise that what is the data type for that property. So in that particular case, that is, I think it's a string value, because then it has to host many different marking types of the in Europe, because it's letters and numbers which are used, but those are kind of it would be nice to have everything like enumerated data types, which would kind of improve the machine readability. But at least, well, at least now we decided that we are kind of doing compromises at this stage, and we did not change the current data types of the current IFC properties, nor did we introduce any new data types.
But we did identify that there are two properties: fire resistance and fire reaction.
Yeah.
And we made sure they can accommodate it. And if in use in Europe or UK or wherever, it would be possible with the IDS to specify a template for what form those pieces of text should take, exactly what the sequence of letters and numbers are allowed to be. So that's another kind of configuration that we can anticipate people doing.
Then there's another question there are some regulations, regulatory requirements about health and safety, especially about the end of use safety file.
Well, I think in Europe and in the UK, again, there are specific processes that have to be gone through of preparing information for handover to by the constructor to hand over to the owner and occupier of a facility. There are already property sets within IFC for representing risk and associating it to physical objects, to spaces, and indeed to activities. So I think that is a separate subject. And the other thing that we're recommending is where a regulation is satisfied by the existence of documents, which is very common. We've suggested there can be a property set for exceptions and compliances to clauses from other documents and so on. So we've tried to support those kinds of things, but risk is already a property set within the IFC. It's been there since 2x3. It was revised for IFC 4.3, and it pretty much matches up with what ISO 19650 Part 6 will say when that's published next year.
One of the things that we also kind of in our use cases, we had the energy and the footprint, the carbon footprint of the building. But to be honest, that in that field, the legislation is kind of, there is a quite rapid shift at the moment, that the legislation in Europe at least is developing. So we actually don't know what is the final outcome of that, and I think that for that, like for carbon footprint and LCA type of things, we need to come back later in the later projects. Maybe they are in under building domain or something like that. But anyway, that is a field which is kind of moving forward quite fast at the moment. So
in fact, yeah, there is a separate domain called the sustainability domain within buildingSMART, and we have also prepared a set of information requirements, sustainability information requirements, covering the 4 major modules that are discussed when it comes to sustainability. Not every country is implementing every module, so they may want to ignore some of the 4 modules, but the first and primary one is embedded carbon, because that's almost universal as being a metric. And in the sustainability domain, we have identified what information needs to be in the BIM model, in the facility model, whether it's infrastructure or building, and then what information has to be attached to the major product or component types. And then there's a third IDS, which is addressing what information needs to be in an environmental declaration in order to tie it back to the component types, and therefore how we can tie those, an application can tie those back to a facility model. So that, again, is an area where buildingSMART is trying to offer internationally a baseline. But as I say, some countries will only be interested in module A. Others are interested in A, B, and C. And a few are now saying that D, which has always been optional, should also be considered. So again, the same approach of identifying the information requirements and then making sure that they are testable has been applied to that. But we'll be launching those in a month or two's time. Okay.
We are also fully aware that the outcome is kind of it's a compromise, but it's also I think that it's not kind of, it's not ready in a way, because it's not the kind of final outcome. There is more and more jurisdiction adopting BIM-based building permit at the moment, and doing so, I think that the kind of the need for more information will come up pretty soon. So we have to follow what is the kind of needs there will come from different countries, and especially from the countries who are early birds in adopting the IFC in their building permit systems. Obviously, the kind of the more you get, the more you want. It's kind of it's like a kind of a loop that it's all the time we need to be developing this. But it's in a way it's good that now we have some kind of basis, and I think it forms a good starting point for jurisdictions, cities, building authorities, regulators, countries to start, and kind of it's a basic set of things, which is a combination of existing things in IFC. I would say that at least for me, this project has opened up eyes to see that actually there is a lot of things already existing in the IFC. We just many times don't know. We are not aware of that, and like the example of Nick brought up, there is the risk component which is already there. So there is a lot of unused potential in the IFC itself as it is today, and now we are just kind of adding few things which are missing from the regulatory point of view. But I guess that that's kind of not the end of the journey. This is the beginning of the journey, I guess.
Okay, thanks, Tomi. Are there any other questions or comments? In that case, I'll just conclude by saying that the email address for the group is on the screen, regulatory@buildingSMART.org. If you have any further questions, please use it, and one of us will reply. Also, if you'd be prepared to put a bit of time into testing either the reviewing or testing the BSDD entries or the IDS files, if you're familiar with that, then please do get in touch, and we can, as the final deliverables become available, we'll be able to help you have a go, and so on. I think what we've seen today is that the BSDD as a host for these kinds of supplementary information is having an increasingly important role. Both the sustainability information requirements, the regulatory information requirements, and the building energy modeling information requirements will be hosted in the BSDD. In fact, some of the sustainability things are already there. And also the importance of IDS as a means to convey human readable requirements that are also machine readable. It's a mechanism for actually making both well, agreed information exchanges testable. And I think that's something that the industry has been looking for ever since sharing BIM models became possible, so that we can have more automation in the preparation of information. And of course, as we said at the beginning, we're opening up for the to support both automated compliance checking, but also supported compliance checking. How do we make the job of the regulator easier? One way to do that, of course, is to make it easier for designers to include the right information, designers and engineers. Okay. Thank you, Scott. That's great. Okay. If there are no further questions, I really like to thank you all for participating. And I hope that we've answered the leading questions that came to mind. Yes, as I said, any further questions or thoughts, do let regulatory@buildingsmart.org know. Okay. Thank you, Demetrius. That's it's unusual to get that kind of feedback, but it's nice. So
Yes,
it's good. Okay. Right.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Tomi, for your work. Okay.